Uh, Good afternoon, and we'll come to the bread and butter of ophthalmology, that is to operate our cases. This is what constitutes the bread and butter for an ophthalmologist. Let's see how we can start our OTs and when we can start them, and is there any need to do any modifications in your current OT. I'm Dr. Raju. I'm director at Netra Spandana Eye Hospital in Bangalore. What is important to understand is, this is the disclaimer I would like to say. I have not treated or operated a single case of COVID positive patient. Luckily, there is not a single case report of any ophthalmologist in the whole world who has operated on a COVID positive patient till date. So, when and how we can start our ocular surgeries? Should we wait and watch and go slow, or should we start as early as possible? These are the two questions that will be in our mind. Well, when to start? If you look at the map here, you can see some of the districts have not reported a single case, while others are hotspots. So it's important to follow the local authorities, what instructions they give based on the zoning, and based on that, you can decide whether you want to start your practice and to what level you need to start your practice. It has to be an individual decision. So how to start our ocular surgeries? Well, first thing is we should plan for the worst and hope for the best, because a person who is well prepared has already won half the battle. So, are you prepared adequately to start your routine OPD and OT? So, are you ready with your manpower, your clinical protocols, administrative needs, the supply chain logistics, and the infrastructure? So you need to understand that each of your staff should know how to use the appropriate PPE and its appropriate use. So you should train them for that. And you also, counseling and consent is desirable for those of us who are running our own centers from our staff. As far as the clinical preparation is concerned, it's important to triage these patients and screen the patient at the OPD level. Make sure the supply chain logistics and the availability of the hospital essentials are in place before you go full throttle. Preparing written protocols is very important. Let me explain here. So suppose you are telling a sodium hypochlorite solution to be used. So what solution, what percentage of it is to be used, how to prepare that, how to use it, how many times to use it, and who are the designated persons who will use it, and what protection should they wear when they are doing the disinfection. So all these things should be written down in your protocol. Also understand the science behind them, how to store it, what is their stability, what is the minimum contact time for each of the disinfectants that are using. And also know the math. Just by saying 1:10 dilution of sodium hypochlorite doesn't mean taking 1 part of sodium hypochlorite and diluting in 10 parts. It's actually taking 1 part and adding it to 9 parts. Simple charts like this, which can be downloaded from the CDC, can be useful for the patient, for the staff to understand what we are telling them in a pictorial way, so that it's easy for them to follow in their day-to-day practice. So PPE for all is the very important thing. If you're a hospital administrator, make sure that everyone and of your team, of your organization has the appropriate PPE based on their risk, and impart training to them. Remember that even if one among the staff tests positive, all of us will be quarantined and the department may be temporarily out of service. So as far as the infrastructure is concerned, so whether we should modify the existing infrastructure, redesignate it, or should we add new infrastructures? All these things should be done with the mind to minimize the infection spread among the patients as well as the hospital staff. So this is very important. So, but you should understand this will differ for every organization. All of us will have different needs because of the various situations that we are in as far as the infrastructure is concerned. As far as the current testing protocols are concerned, we can group our patients into two groups. A group one would be a presumed COVID negative or a definite COVID negative or previously COVID positive and now is COVID negative. The second group is a COVID suspect patient, but we are not yet tested him. And the next is a definite COVID positive patient. Now, as far as the group 2 is concerned, it's very clear no elective surgeries for these patients. If you can postpone the surgeries by 4 weeks, these are elective cases. It's better not to operate any electives in these patients at all. If there are emergencies, if you are not able to defer it, then it should be performed in a government-approved multi-specialty hospital for COVID-19 treatment. And the people who are there in that team taking care of these patients should have the full PPE for all the healthcare workers, and they should also consider a HCQ prophylaxis. So the two mantras are defer these cases, take them up later if you are fully prepared, or refer them if you are not prepared. So defer or refer. Most of us would come into the second category. As far as people who are in the COVID positive, wherein their infrastructure is there to treat the COVID positive patients, this should be a trained multi-specialty in a hospital, trained team in a multi-specialty hospital. They should have access to the complete PPE. There should be no compromise on this. An OT with negative pressure ventilation with separate donning and doffing areas would be required when you are operating these COVID positive patients. And the various the planning has to be done as far as the infrastructure is concerned. Make sure that this COVID operating area is very close to the OT, and so that the patient can be easily and quickly shifted to the OT. And after the procedure is done, all the items that are used are replaced. So these are the things that we have to take into our planning when we are doing these COVID positive cases. As far as the group 1 is concerned, right now we have in a situation wherein the testing protocols are changing every day. And there are key considerations that are there are the high number of asymptomatic patients, there is variable incubation period, unreliable history, high false negatives, and changing testing criteria, as I told you. It's also important to understand we do not know the current status of the community spread. So what are the OT modifications that we would like to have? The frequently asked questions would be, what cases would you want to operate? Do you want to operate routine or emergency cases? Should I change my protocols? Which one for which cases? What are the possible scenarios that we will have? And what are the guidelines with respect to the air handling units? So as far as the guidelines are concerned, what I will be telling you now would be the pooled experiences and protocols in various institutes of India and across the world. I would like to acknowledge the following doctors: Dr. Manatosh from Singapore, Dr. Kiran Solanki from United Kingdom, Dr. Sirish Bangalore, Dr. Rohan Chawla from AIIMS Delhi, Dr. Tirumalesh, Dr. Vivek Dave, Dr. Nicholas from Germany, and Dr. Rajesh from Shankara Hospital in Bangalore. So we have spoken to all of them, and this is the gist of what you would be doing. But it's also important to understand what is known as a drop, what is not known as an ocean. And we are all treating these patients only. All those institutes are right now only treated presumed COVID negative patients, and they have operated only emergency cases. So what are the modifications that you need to do in your OT practice? As far as the patient related is concerned, it's important to make the patient wear the mask and to sanitize their hands before you take them into the OT. These are the two important additional protocols that we need to do. At least sanitize the patient's hand twice before shifting inside the OT and once after the case is finished. As far as the using the mask is concerned, tape the mask on all the 3 sides so that this will prevent slipping and also reduce the spread of aerosol to the surrounding. The mask will only be open at one side while it is sealed at all the 3 sides. And preferably better for the patient to wear a cap and a disposable patient gown. The other things that I've been told is the use of povidone iodine, betadine gargle has been suggested, but we are still unsure whether this is going to help in the days to come. As far as the surgeons and surgical team is concerned, divide your team or your unit into two departments. Let the teams be as uniform as possible and as balanced. Do separate OPDs and OT shifts on weekly basis. They should not meet each other both on duty and off duty. This is important because in the event of an exposure and the team being quarantined, at least the other team can be operational. Coming to the masks, again, the surgeons who have operated during these times and they have operated on the emergency cases, different people have used different protocols. In Germany, even during these times, the routine cases have been operated by using a 3-ply mask itself, while in UK also, they are using surgical masks for non-COVID cases. They are using, while in Singapore and India, they are suggesting to use the N95 masks. If you see the ENT guidelines from the laryngoscope journal, they also say if the patient's COVID status is known, you to go with regular masks and regular surgical gowns. However, because the transmission can happen through small droplets from normal breathing, coughing and sneezing, we would recommend at least we should try to use a N95 or a N99 masks. The surgeon using the PPE, many of them are using the HIV kits with disposable gowns worn on surgical scrubs. Some people have used the coveralls, and some of them also have used the autoclavable coveralls on surgical scrubs. However, it's important to understand it's very difficult to don this for surgical use, very difficult to be inside for long hours, and it is difficult to doff. So this design that is used in Singapore would probably be useful for the doctors who are going to operate. We are actually trying to work with the industry with the correct material for designing the COVID surgical gowns. So in most practices, a disposable surgical gown, double gloves, N95 mask, and shoe covers would be required when you're operating these cases. Coming to the air handling, most of these institutes have operated in routine ophthalmic OTs without any modifications in the infrastructure or very minimal modifications. And it's important to remember all these institutes are operating in operation theaters with air handling units fitted with HEPA filters. And these are positive pressure ventilation systems. As far as the air handling unit is concerned, this is the guideline from the Royal College of Surgeons of England. It is very important to read that. It says the laminar flow and conventionally ventilated theaters should remain fully on during the surgical procedures where the patients may have COVID-19 infection. And what they say is the rapid dilution of the aerosols by the operating theater ventilation will protect the operating room staff. Air passing from the operation theater to the adjacent area will be highly diluted and is not considered to be a risk. So this is very important guideline that has come out from the Royal College of Surgeons. So better to use an OT with HEPA filtered air, minimal staff, all OT instruments should be planned and should be taken inside. Do not open or avoid opening the OT door during the case. And after finishing the case, run the AHU for at least 20 to 30 minutes before taking up the next case so that the dilution will remove all the infectious particles. The Indian Society of Heating and Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Engineers, that is the ISHRE, has come out with guidelines. The room temperature should be set between 24 to 30 degrees, and we should maintain a relative humidity between 40 to 60. So better to use an OT with HEPA and laminar flow. I know many of us, the ophthalmic practitioners in small towns and discrete places, have split ACs. It is not recommended to use these during these times, and these are pure recirculation units. However, you can consult the AHU experts and try to add fan filtering units with HEPA and also additional powerful exhaust fan with HEPA with ducting to release these exhaust at least 3 meters above the highest point of your building. This can be considered after talking to your AHU expert. As far as the anesthesia is concerned, topical is preferred where feasible. Local anesthesia would be preferred compared to the GA. If GA is unavoidable, take precautions during the start and the end of the GA. That is, during intubation and extubation carries the highest risk of aerosol generation. These periods have to be taken care correctly. So what you should do during GA case is only the patient and the anesthetic team with the complete PPE will start the induction. The surgeon will not enter into the OT during this period. And for 20 minutes, the AHU will be running so that the air gets diluted of all the infectious aerosols. After the ET tube is secured and sealed, you should wait for 20 minutes. Then the surgical team with the appropriate attire will enter into the OT. The surgical team completes the procedure and leaves the OT immediately. They will not stay when the extubation is happening. Then the anesthetic team will again take over. They'll wear with their PPE, will extubate the patient, and this patient will be directly shifted to the ward. And before you take the next patient, you should do all the disinfection protocols. Wait for 20 minutes for the AHU to run so that again the dilution happens. And you can also use the ultraviolet light during this period of waiting for the disinfection to augment your disinfection processes. As far as the infection control steps are concerned, double pack your instrument set. Open the pack after the patient is draped. The used instrument should immediately be removed from the OT before the drape is removed from the patient or from the patient side to prevent aerosol contamination of the used instruments. As far as the draping is concerned, I would like to spend some extra minutes here. Spend extra time during the draping. Put povidone iodine in the cul-de-sac. Properly paint with povidone iodine and wait. Wait for it to dry. It is preferable to use large size 2-layered disposable eye drapes, not the regular eye towels, cotton eye towels. Make sure you securely create an adhesion along the bridge of the nose so as to isolate the nasal area and the mouth. The patient should compulsorily wear the mask. As I told, tape all the 3 sides of the mask so that it doesn't slip down. Spend extra time when you're removing the drape. This is also very important. You should not touch the inside surface of the drape when you're removing it. A person with surgical gown, double gloves should remove this drape very slowly, and you should sanitize immediately before removing the gloves. The aerosol generation during ophthalmic procedures, I've been told that different procedures may produce it, but there are a lot of unknown variables. Is the aerosol that is generated is from a potentially contaminated area, or does it contain the virus? So we don't have answers for many of these questions. As far as phaco versus SICS is concerned, SICS may score over the phaco. However, there is no clear-cut evidence of risk during phaco, but aerosol generation due to ultrasound is a concern. Extra precautions during phaco may be needed. Please await the expert guidelines from the AOS. Camps may need to be stopped for near future, at least for 6 months to 12 months till things clear out. Intraarterial injections can be performed once the lockdown is eased. Vitrectomies can be performed. Glaucoma and squint can be performed once the lockdown is eased. It's important to assess the risk versus benefit when you're doing surgery during the COVID times. You need to decide case-to-case basis, start slowly and stabilize your protocols. There are a lot of gray areas. Things may clear up with time. So as the COVID-19 pandemic spreads, the surgeons will be faced with difficult questions, and we need to balance between the safety of our patients, our families, and the community as a whole. Ophthalmologists have an important position as healthcare providers due to the nature of our specialty. Practices and recommendations will evolve based on new data, the availability of the testing and resources. This is going to be a changing recommendation that you are going to see on a day-to-day basis. But what this pandemic has shown is cleanliness is next to godliness, and health is the real wealth. And healthcare workers are the real heroes. I would like to share my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Sujata Rathod, Director Minto, for giving me this chance to speak to you all, and to the whole Bangalore Medical College, the Victor Hospital team, of which I'm an alma mater. They have been the COVID warriors in this fight against the coronavirus, and you're all done us proud, is what I can say. So I would say thanks to all of you, and we have also formed a team called as the Save the Saviors, and we are trying to donate PPEs to those who are in need in case of an emergency. Please visit the site savethesaviors.com. Thank you very much.